so I guess.
It's always late in college.
Do I need to stand right in the center? I can move over here. That way I don't have to stand right in front of them. I feel awkward. Cool. What am I? Hello, everyone. Go green. Excellent. I'm in good company. Welcome to Innovate State on the heart of MSU's campus here in East Lansing, Michigan. My name is Chris Sell. I'm a member of the team with the Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship Innovation. How many of you, is this your first Innovate State experience? Excellent. Wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you to the first-timers, and thank you to those of you who've come back for a second or third or fourth Innovate State. This is our Fireside Chat speaker series that we host throughout the fall and spring semesters here at Michigan State, featuring innovators, executives, investors, and founders and entrepreneurs, many of whom are Spartan alumni who come back to campus and graciously give their time to share their stories with all of you. So I appreciate everyone being here. We have many students in the room. We also have some notable alumni, both local and from afar. So thank you to all of you for being here today, and to those of you who might be tuning in and watching online. We are proud to run and administer the campus-wide entrepreneurship education program here at Michigan State. And subsequently, we offer a lot of flagship programming throughout the year that is available to students, regardless of your major, regardless if you're enrolled in the entrepreneurship minor, regardless of how seasoned of an entrepreneur you are. In fact, if you're not, some of our programming is a perfect fit for you. So a few of those upcoming programs that we have coming up just in the next few weeks, I want to make sure you're aware of. We have an event called 2-Day Venture. It's like pickup basketball for entrepreneurs. And it's a really low-cost event that is over 36 hours, and it's taking place on March 30th and April 1st. And if you haven't done one before, it's super fun. We feed you really well. It takes place here. We take over the whole first level of the pavilion, and it's a great opportunity for you to get maybe credit for a course, but also for you to form a team and work on solving a problem or coming up with an idea to take to the market. And I will tell you, many of the best venture ideas or teams that have come through our program find their genesis at a 2-day venture. So I highly recommend it. Again, it's taking place the end of March into the first day of April. We also have our flagship student business model competition or pitch competition called the Burgess Institute Challenge, taking place on Thursday, April 13th. This program will be held at the Graduate Hotel in downtown East Lansing. Students are welcome and encouraged to attend the finals event. I think it starts at 4 p.m. that afternoon on Thursday, April 13th. Last year, we hosted around 400 people, including upwards of 150 students. It's a great opportunity to interact with many of the top student venture teams at Michigan State University, and you get to watch the top 5 teams pitch in front of a live audience. It's a great event. It's super fun. We hand out upwards of $50,000 in prize money. So if you are a freshman or a sophomore thinking about how cool it might be to one day take an idea to the marketplace with the help of the Burgess Institute, or if you're a seasoned entrepreneur but haven't worked with our offices before, this program is still for you. And we welcome and encourage your attendance that afternoon and evening. Again, that's Thursday, April 13th. You can register for free at our website, which is eship.msu.edu. The last thing I'll mention is that the Burgess New Venture Challenge is actually part of a wider, much more robust week that we're calling Entrepreneurship and Innovation Week at MSU. That is Monday, April 10th through Friday, April 14th. We have events every day, and in some cases, because we're gluttons for punishment. We have multiple events on one day that are all free and available to students. So on Monday, we're going to have ESIP at the Rock, where we hang out at the Rock and hand out coffee and donuts. I think it's coffee and donuts. And then we're also going to be handing out more information about the rest of the week in our programs. We're going to have Zoom founders chats with incredible alumni founders and entrepreneurs. We're going to host another Innovate State featuring Ankur Waraku from India, who's traveling here from India to share his story. And then, of course, the Burgess Inventor Challenge on that Thursday. So you can find more information, again, at our website if you just go to entrepreneurship.msu.edu. Without further ado, I'm so delighted to introduce our featured guest this evening. My colleague, Dr. Laurel Offstein, is going to be moderating the conversation, but Simon Yu is from New York City, decided to make the trip here to East Lansing to talk more about his journey from being a student in the Broad College of Business to finding his way to Detroit and then finding his way back to Manhattan and working on not just one, but two different ventures after spending some time in banking and finance using his degree from the Broad College. So Simon, I first met over a year ago, talking online and making that connection, learning more about his career path. And you can just tell he's a good human. He's a proud Spartan. He's thrilled to be back to talk more about his story, insights learned, lessons gained, and I think you'll really enjoy hearing his story. So without further ado, if you could join me in welcoming Simon and Laurel to the stage.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
Everything that Chris just said about all the events coming up, lean into that stuff, right? The hardest thing, as most of you know, with entrepreneurship is taking that first step, right? And having the guidance of Michigan State supporting you for that. So for anyone here that, I don't care if it's tech related or not tech related, right? Lean into that, right? This is the best time to start something is when you're in college. So I'm jealous.
I'll second that. Hey, that's great. Well, welcome, Simon, and thank you so much for being here with us. Obviously, we have a room mostly full of students here, so tell us a little bit about how you were as a student here at MSU and what experiences during your time here maybe influenced your career journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start from the beginning, right? And I hope like with this whole conversation, right, it's just be about being transparent, right? And it could relate to things outside of startups or not, just life in general, right? Like obviously being at Michigan State, I think something that I learned to do is embrace that underdog mentality, right? And how do you use that underdog mentality and, and using it as fuel to really defy the odds of succeeding, right? And coming to Michigan State was a big thing. And starting from day one, I've never publicly like really told people about this, but I was waitlisted. Right, I was waitlisted, came in here thinking I want to pursue investment banking, and being Asian with Asian parents, my parents wanted me to be two things: a doctor or a lawyer. I knew I wanted something a little bit different. I found out this whole career path about investment banking, Wall Street, and really did research about what I can actually do at Michigan State. And I found out about this program that was new at the time called the Financial Markets Institute, the FMI. I think at the time there was probably 3 classes ahead of us. And it was hard because in the beginning, I didn't have the grades to represent me as a great candidate for the program, right? And I remember hearing that where, like the kids that get in this usually is a 4.0 GPA, they're involved, and I was none of those things. And I was very lucky where, I met the person that really started the program, Helen Dashley. I'm not sure how many people know her in this room, but she's an amazing woman here, right? And she's really impacted the lives of so many alums through this college. And she took a chance on me, right? I really tried to prove myself, got involved with student orgs. I did student consulting for nonprofit, and I did Student Investment Association, and then got into the FMI. And then at the time, talk about like crazy timing was, like trying to get a job on Wall Street when the 2008 recession was going on, and everyone telling me like, there's no job for you here, right? Eventually, I, got a job, got an internship. But even that job I got at Deutsche Bank, I was rejected the first time, right? They told me no because, at the time, all these banks were trying to consolidate their analyst class, right? Traditional analyst class is about, call it 100 kids or so. That year, they were accepting 20. And basically, they told me, like, if you didn't go to Harvard or one of those schools, we're not going to take you because we don't have relationships with your school. And I don't want to get into details because it's probably not appropriate here, but like, turned that no, and I somehow got a yes out of it, right? I basically dangled another offer I had in front of them, and they interviewed me a second time, and they gave me the offer. So basically, I did the whole investment banking career path. I went to this bank called Deutsche Bank, covering consumer retail. So basically, what that means is that we worked with companies like Nike, right? If they're trying to acquire a company like Under Armour, this is all fake, by the way, it's not real. They would approach us about how do we acquire them, right? Do we issue equity, debt, right? And we try to figure out things from there. So during my career there, worked on a lot of these big, call it like Wall Street Journal type deals. And what I kind of realized at the end of the day is that I didn't resonate with these big companies, right? A lot of times, like we were just having a conversation before where, these big names, like these big CEOs, are thinking about how do I get rich from this deal? Not so much how do I impact the world in that sense, right? And some of my favorite deals were the smallest deals I ever worked on because I was working with small founders who built the business from day one. And I realized instead of going to traditional private equity, I want to jump and do growth equity, right? So I joined this firm. It was interesting because it was part of a larger firm in New York, but it was also part of CA, which is a talent agency. So I don't know how many people watch Entourage here, but CA is one of the largest talent agencies. And at the time, they were trying to diversify their business around figuring out like, all right, so if we have all these celebrities and athletes, like if you're a clothing brand, a jeans company, wherever it might be, and you want a celebrity endorsement, we're probably one call away. So if you take growth capital from us, we can really help push you at that new level. So there's more companies that are, doing call it 1 to 10 million to 20 million in sales, looking for growth capital to make it 100 million to potentially IPO. So, that I guess that kind of went through my career at Michigan State, but yeah.
Well, I mean, you went from finance, you had this whole career in finance, and then, at some point you started your first venture. So can you tell us a little bit about how you made that transition from, really being in this finance world to, you hinted at a little bit of it, I think, but, how did you come up with your idea? Where did Yuday come from?
Yeah, so basically, it's just like any other person, you kind of question what's your purpose in life and are you really happy with the things that you're doing? It was crazy because you work so hard to try to get this job and then one day you're like, wait, is this really what I want? Or am I doing this because all my friends are doing this kind of thing? And it's hard. And at the time, the startup ecosystem isn't what it is now, right? Now it seems like people do banking or they do private equity and they go work for a big VC firm. At that time, it was like, no, you go join a PE firm or you go get your MBA. And I knew I didn't want that, right? And I ultimately quit finance. I went and volunteered in Africa for a little bit. And I went there thinking I was gonna go kind of coach soccer and, in South Africa. And, I realized that those kids are much better at soccer than me. So I became a glorified gym teacher instead. But, I did that. I did wildlife conservation in Zimbabwe, I did marine conservation in Madagascar. But on my free time, I would go into the local villages to go teach, right? And I don't know about everyone in this room, but I lived in a bubble. I'm not gonna lie. I grew up in Metro Detroit area. I really never traveled, never been out my comfort zone. Even being first generation, right? I didn't see how hard it really is. And when you go to places like that, you really see that education truly is a privilege, right? For a lot of these students that I dealt with there, right? It wasn't the right choice to go to school. The right choice was to go make money for your family. Right, and going to school was actually a sacrifice, but they thought about what's the potential impact for me down the road. If I do know English, I could do all those things. So coming back, I knew I wanted to do something very entrepreneurial, and just like most people here that are going down that path, it's you come up with all the crazy ideas, right? Dating apps, like Snapchat, all these other things, and that was at a time that was interesting where I'm not really sure what happened, but maybe it's just me getting old, where my social media feed went from all my friends going to concerts and vacations and going out to bars and clubs to then having kids, right? And then first day of school.
It will happen.
Right? It will happen. I know it sounds crazy for a lot of you guys here, right? But it will happen one day. And I remember seeing that. I'm like, oh, it's interesting that I can relive through my friend's vacation. But every single day, families question what happens when my kid goes to school, what's going on in their day, right? And it brought me back to my own childhood, and this is where I really feel the problem is, being first generation, my parents own a Chinese restaurant. They work 7 days a week. They missed out on most of my childhood, not because they didn't want to be there, but because they couldn't be there. So, and I was very lucky where I had amazing teachers that actually took photos back then, developed the photos, right, and would send them home to my parents to see. I remember how excited my parents would get when they see the photos of what's going on throughout my year, my day, and the conversation that sparked from it. Fast forward to today, you have Instagram stories, you have Snap, you have TikTok, you have all these other things. Video is becoming the dominant platform for communications. It's actually very efficient. And I thought, all right, like could we build a startup around that? So we started this company called Yuday, and that was my first time dealing with startups, right? And I joke now because I'm like, if I could go back in time, go work at a startup, because what you do is that you build a Rolodex of people in the startup community, if it's engineers, designers, right? For me, I had to network my butt to like, try to like, meet technical people. I'm sure everyone that has, that startup idea, it's like, wait, who's gonna build this for me, right? And I wish I was smart enough to code. Not, right?
Me neither.
So, and it was just like through networking, and I met my then technical co-founder, and then we started building the startup. And, it was really interesting because we built this pre-COVID, right? And at the time, it was interesting because it makes a little more sense now, but back then, right? Obviously, anything that revolves around education, around kids, privacy is always gonna be top of mind, right? And, and we built this app, and it got amazing feedback from teachers, very organic, right? We had hundreds of teachers using it, right? Teachers were sharing 10 to 15 stories every single day, right? Parent engagement was 98% Monday through Friday. And what I know now, those were very strong metrics to move forward. But in that moment, I felt like I was a failure because it wasn't Instagram. Right? And it was because I never had experience working at a startup before. All I understood were the TechCrunch articles and all the good things, right? Like that you hear about, right? And then it was until I, down the road that I eventually realized I'm like, okay, is this the right thing or not, right? And then we'll get to that later, but yeah, so.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that a little bit, you had this venture, was kind of successful, and and how do you think you were measuring success?
I was measuring success by talking to my users, right? And I think people ask me, and we'll get to it later with my new company, but that's what kept me going, even with this new pivot, with this new company, is I've seen it used in its optimal format, right? Where teachers were telling me how important it was for them. Parents telling me how meaningful it was, how it completely changed the way that they communicate with their kids, right? I still remember this one teacher telling me this one parent in the class is in the military and all these are, right? It's all these small narratives that you hear and you're like, wow, what I'm doing, it has a small impact, right? And trying to say, okay, do I keep going forward with this? So.
Yeah, great. So you had this venture, now you have a new venture. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you've maybe grown and changed as an entrepreneur from that first venture to now. What lessons did you learn along the way that maybe you can prevent some of these students from some, problems that they could avoid maybe when they think about developing their
just like everyone in this room, COVID impacted everything, right? Schools were shut down, all this other thing, and it was interesting where I always. I bootstrapped my first company, right? I spent my own money doing this, and obviously I had a technical co-founder, which helped. You gotta find the right person, right, to build that team with. And I never felt confident of raising any money with this person because, they were never truly that passionate about it in that sense. And I don't, this person has done everything to get me in that position to do well, but. We built this thing, and all of a sudden COVID hit and the schools were shut down, and we're like, okay, well, there's a lot of good headwinds post-COVID, right? Think about number one, video doesn't seem as foreign anymore in classrooms, right? Every classroom has been on Zoom, right? But obviously we gotta think about the social media aspect, how do you make sure that this content is private and protected, right? Number two, right, we saw how important family engagement was. You saw how important student wellness was, mental health for both the teacher and for the parents. And we said, what if we can kind of create a new app around that, right? Basically call it Yuday 2.0. Right? But what eventually happened is, I went through a co-founder breakup where this guy I was working with didn't want to raise money, didn't want to build, and we kind of just went our separate ways. And that was hard because I could have gave up then and there, and I decided, well, let's go find a new technical partner. And I think that's the most important thing is, right, like I think investors will tell you that too, is you bet on the team, right? Not even the idea, right? And I had a lot of people, everyone's gonna give you different advice, and it's your job as a founder, as a person, to figure out what is advice I'm gonna act on, right? Some people told me, go raise money, hire an agency, and you'll find a technical person somewhere else. And for me, like, I love the whole team format. I love working with someone. I want to build whatever we can dream of, right? Because, you know, as we all know, startups fail, right? It might not be this idea, but it might be the second idea. But if I hire an agency, I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it, and then it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Second one is like, okay, I got to raise more. So I really did the hard work of just trying to meet the right person, right? And I would stress that on everyone right now is, you know, you got to do the diligence on your relationship. And people, I'm sure for anyone here that takes the entrepreneurship class, you know, team is everything. But like, it's easy in the beginning when you're a first-time founder and you're not technical and you're just desperate to work on a cool idea with someone. But I would take a little bit more time in making sure that your visions are aligned, right? Do I want to raise money? What's my end goal? Will we sell, right? Do we want to bootstrap and all these other things? And, you know, in New York, I do a lot of like kind of mentoring with other founders, and it's not even mentoring, it's really a support system, right? It's because, you know, along this whole journey, like I'm trying to figure this out too, right? I'm not gonna sit up here and tell you like I have all the answers to certain things. I'm still trying to figure out, I'm still writing the story. And you need good people around you to support you during this journey, right? To tell you, hey, Simon, like you're looking at this wrong, you gotta focus on this, and vice versa. And there's this one founder that I was working with. I was actually trying to plug him into Michigan State as well too. He was doing like a mentorship platform, and I saw on his LinkedIn that he had this engineering mentor speaker coming in from Apple talking. I looked him up. I'm like, oh crap, he's a Michigan State person, right? And had no connections to Michigan State. And like in New York, that Michigan State network is strong, right? I kid you not, where people really know each other there because there's not a lot of us there. And so right away I reached out to him, and we built that relationship, right? And we really did the work to figure out like, is this really what you want, right? Because he had this high-paying job. He didn't like need to leave. He was on the Apple Pay team, very technical. But I sold him on the mission. I was telling you before, where like originally he was like, like I don't want to code for life, but I really want to do film, right? And I'm like, you know what? What I'm trying to do really is storytelling, right? We're helping teachers craft their story of what their day is like, right? And for a lot of you guys are familiar with TikTok and creators and stuff. I think teachers are the OG creators, right? Every day there's content, every day there's an audience, right? How can we help these teachers out, right? And so him and I started partnering together and think out what does, you know, this new company look like? For legal reasons, we're starting a new company, right? So we came up with this new name. It's called Daisy, like the flower, right? And we raised a little bit of money, and we brought on, kind of built a team around that, and we started thinking about the product. And so it's basically like, it really is another version of Instagram stories for education, right? And it's interesting, we don't have any of the mock-ups here, but it's, on Instagram stories, you guys have the archive section, and you can go back on certain dates and see what stories that you posted. We're doing that for schools and for teachers. So imagine as a teacher, I can go back in my portfolio and see, what did I do for Christmas last year, right? So it creates that portfolio for them. But on the parent side, I get to see my kids' day from last week, from this week, and so forth. I can get to relive that day, right? And the bigger idea of what we're trying to do is go after, they call it the yearbooks and school pictures, right? Where parents spend a lot of money commemorating their child's year, right? I think there's a better format for that now, especially for the younger parents that are more digital native. And we think that there's an interesting way to monetize that, but also use that funding to give back to education nonprofits, right? And I think a story that I will tell most of you, right, if you're starting a company, it's, I'm guilty of it too, right? It's, don't try to sell your users with features and all that. Tell a story, right? People buy into, that heartstring that you're trying to pull at, where like for us, right, we don't talk about like, there's a million apps that you can upload a photo and video onto a platform, right? But what do we do at the end of the day with Daisy is what we're trying to do is we're trying to allow families to relive the moments that they've missed. That is at the premise of what we're trying to do. And at the same time, you guys celebrate the teachers that show up every single day to make it happen, right? And so we have a couple fun ways where we're trying to inject wellness into the platform, where every morning can we send teachers like a morning welcome message, just like have a great day, words of affirmation, things like that. That's, they'll boost up their day. Is there a way that we could do weekly giveaways or daily giveaways to like fun classroom needs? So it's just like, how do you inject kind of that fun into it? But yeah, so
I love that.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and it's DAYSEE, right?
Yep.
Just, I think even there's sort of a story in the name, right? You kind of can see the day that your child is having, and
well, that was part of it too, because the original name, and I know it's in the marketing collateral, is Classjoy, and my co-founder and I were talking about like, our goal is not to just be in schools, right? It's whenever you're not with your kid, right? So imagine you drop your child off at soccer, at hockey, at dance, at tutoring, right? And basically as a parent, I get one feed of what my child's day is like, right? But obviously, like most founders, right? Like you gotta focus on your core. Our core is schools, right? And then eventually you can expand out of that. So like my co-founder and I were like, what's a good name that could be iconic, that could be an empowering brand behind what we're doing that's not just school related. So Daisy was something like it. It's something so simple. It's like all those hours that went into it. It's another discussion. Yeah. I'm embarrassed to talk how much we talk about naming, but
hey, we don't need to talk about how the sausage is made up here. Just kidding. Yes, no. It's. I mean, I think it's all that sweat equity, right? That makes it such. And clearly it's your passion going into it, and all the time that you spent learning about that industry and what's important to parents and customers.
I think that's the most important thing, right? Because you'll talk with a lot of founders where they're just like, yeah, I don't want to talk to users. I want to build, right? There's a lot of this like startup noise, right? Where it's like, I raised X, I raised this, I raised this, I did this. You don't hear about the other side of who just lost out all their money, right? And I'm glad like my co-founder and I are both very similar, where we're like, hey, let's raise the minimal amount because we don't need to use it, right? But let's have it be a cushion. Let's prove people wrong along the way. And that's kind of like the startup journey as a way too, is right, like people are always going to discredit you, right? People are always going to tell you, your numbers are never going to be great enough. And this is outside of startups. This is just life in general. Like if you're dating, right, you're never going to be good looking enough. You're never going to be tall enough. You're never going to be any of these things. And it's like, it's okay to avoid that noise, right? You just got to focus on you and what you're doing, right? And Sam and I are kind of like, you focus on doing the work, right? And proving yourself out. And from there, everything else will show, right? Because you gotta get product right and you gotta get users on board. Without that, it's nothing. But there's plenty of startups out there where it's just hype driven, right? And 2021 definitely pushed a lot of that in, where if you had NFT in any name, right? You got a couple $1 million, right? Like I had people say, you should put NFTs for schools. I'm like, schools would hate that, right? But like
they're very risk averse.
Yeah, they're very risk averse, right? So yeah.
Yeah, well, good. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, not the risk averse part in the NFTs, but, just in general, like, the proving people wrong. So research has shown that minority founders tend to face a more difficult road with fundraising and with venture growth. So how have you overcome this? What advice do you have for other minority founders?
Yeah,
what have you faced? What have you...
I think the most important thing outside of like company or not is you gotta be confident, right? It seems like it's simple, but it really isn't, right? And I saw it back when I was in investment banking, where it was a very fratty culture, right? That's just what the life. And I saw my friends that were Asians that didn't speak up for themselves, and I saw how they were treated. I always made it clear that you stand up for yourself. Right? You don't get pushed around, and I try to carry that with us. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, but like there's plenty of data supports that minority founders really are more similar with female founders as well too, where they go into a room, they're going to discredit themselves. They're going to say my numbers aren't high enough, my valuation isn't high enough. While no offense to like my friends who are tech bros, go in my room, $20 million post-money valuation for X and whatever. I need all this, right? I'm the same way, right? Like, and I think I'm right in the middle of the two, right? Because I think like maybe being at Michigan State, right? Like you have that humble like roots where you're like, okay, like let's not be cocky, but you have to be confident, right? And I would say to lean into obviously like being different is okay, right? And it was funny because like now like the startup ecosystem has a lot of minority founders, and you hear that a lot. Where in the beginning it was like, oh, you sound different, you look different, you have all these other things, right? You're not as confident. It's like we won't fund you. We're gonna fund this other person at Stanford, right? And other people are like, no, I'm smart actually. I'm actually very smart. I can prove you wrong. I don't actually need to raise this money, and they're proving people wrong. And you hear a lot of people now say like, lean into what makes you different and sell that, right? It's the same way when I was at Michigan State, where I go on these interviews, I'm competing with kids. You know, Andrew was the same thing here, you know, interviewing at all these investment banks. You know, you're going up against kids that went to Harvard, Stanford, and at the end of the day, they're just like you. It's just they went to that school. And after you get that job, that playing field is exactly equal, right? And you kind of embrace that, right? Yeah. And I think it's so important to know that they're not better than you and to really lean into it. But also second, something I think people don't talk about is the guilt of being a minority founder, right? My parents came to this country to provide a better life for my sister and I, right? That means like getting a college degree, getting a job that paid very well, all these other things. So when you leave all that, you're like, is that spitting in your parents' face and saying, I don't care about that, I'm gonna go do the complete opposite? It wasn't until later on I saw it's actually the opposite, right? That their sacrifice gave me the ability to pursue my passion, right? It was until I changed that mindset that you're like, oh wow, like that is very, because I had a lot of guilt. It's like, why would I leave? Like, it's crazy. Why would I leave this high-paying job to go like make nothing or pursue this thing and, you know, beg for money and do all these other things, right? So, but yeah.
We were talking a little bit before this about, you know, the support that you have from, you know, from your chosen family, and, you know, how are your parents now, and what gives you the motivation, I guess, to keep going, the courage to continue to pursue this dream?
Yeah. I would say most important, right, if you guys get anything from this is, you gotta do something that you love, that you truly are passionate about, because if it's fake, you're gonna give up the moment it's hard. And for some people, it's money related. For some people, it's impact related. And at the end of the day, you know what makes you happy, right? And for me, it's obviously seeing the impact it has had with families, with Yuday, right? And that's why I'm excited with this new company. It's like, okay, I get a second chance at this now, right? Taking all my key learnings from the first company and applying it to the second, like, I'll bet on myself on this, right? And knowing what it could potentially do and the impact it would have, right? There's 1.8 billion students that go to school every day, and that's just students going to school, actually, right? Obviously, there's students that don't go to school for whatever reasons. And think about the common thing that gets asked every single day is, what happened at school? If you answer it, I think there could be a business in there somewhere, right? And that pushes me, right? But obviously second is, right, like, you know, we were talking about like just family, right? My wife, right? My wife took a bet on me, right? Pushing me through. And I always say, like, you know, there's no Daisy or any of this stuff without her, right? You know, I could have taken a job and said, you know what? Let's just go back to living that fun New York life and forget this whole entrepreneurship kind of thing. But she's like, I love what you're doing. I love the impact that you're making. And I want to see you like reach this potential, regardless if it's a failure or success, right? I just want to see it through. And there's this common term, right, where it's called burn the ships, right? And she's like, you know, you got to do it, right? Like, stop focusing on your backup plans or whatever you could do, and just focus on this one thing, right? If you fail, at least you know you tried, right? And I think that's the most important thing. But I don't know about you guys, but like, I love being the underdog, right? I love being the 7th seed, right? Not the first seed, right? In anything. But and for me, it's like all the people that have told me why this wouldn't work or why I'm not investable and all these other things. It's like, you know what? I want to prove you wrong, right? And it's okay. It's taking that chip on your shoulder and really embracing it. And I've always turned that into a story, right? Like when I was interviewing at banks, right? Like, you know, getting rejected time after time. It's like, get back up, right? It's okay. And it doesn't matter if it's startup related or like for anyone here that's interviewing for internships or like life in general. Like, life is all about the naysayers, right? You know, everyone's gonna tell you no and all these other things. And it's funny because we create this narrative in our head, right? And I think the topic of this conversation was imposter syndrome, right? Like, I thought I was a failure with the first company. It was until I started meeting other founders in New York. They're like, yeah, I raised $3 million with a pitch deck. I'm like, oh, wow. So what have you built? Nothing. Well, we're going to go raise some more money again. I'm like, wait, what? And then I'm like, I actually have a real product that people are using, and I think I'm not good. that I shouldn't raise any money, right? And you're always going to create these narratives in your head for why people won't bet on you, right? And the funny thing is, the story that you build in your head is usually much, much worse than what's real. You gotta remember that most people, me included, are selfish. You care about yourself, right? And I know me as a founder, I'm always like, oh, well, what do my friends think? Like, what does this person think? They're gonna ask why I'm not going faster or any of those things. And then you realize, like, people are busy with their own life, right? And you just gotta move at your own, right, at your own speed. And as long as you can go to sleep knowing that you tried, you gave your 110, like, that's all that really mattered, right? So.
Yeah, I think for, sometimes when you take a risk, you have to ask yourself, like, am I employable? Like, if this doesn't work out, like, could I go be hired by someone else? And, I think so often, founders don't think about that as like, you don't want to always have a backup plan. You want to burn the ships. But sometimes I think if you think, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's probably not that bad.
It's a very true thing. And actually, I've, given the whole startup environment, I've seen a lot of friends that are founders like just give up on their startups, and that is a very true thing, and something that I talk to them about. Like, I think about that day after day. It's like, I have this whole background, but now I'm like, oh, like, could I get an entry-level job at a startup? And like, it was until like another founder like that have raised a lot of money goes, I would hire you as like the chief of staff tomorrow if you wanted that. I'm like, okay, so like I could get a job, but like, okay, but that narrative is in my head, and I'm fearful of that. Like, what if this thing doesn't work, right? How am I gonna support my family? How am I gonna do all these things, right? And the mind is interesting, right? Like, it plays all these games, and
it's a dark, dark place. Just kidding.
It could be.
Well, can you tell us a little bit more about like where the app is, kind of what what your plans are for the business, kind of in the near term?
So right now we just wrapped up with like the design stuff and building. So we're actually going to launch both an iOS and Android app next month in April. So we're going to do like a private beta. Just getting select group of teachers and parents on board, and then we're going to try to do a broader push this summer before the new school year, right? And it's interesting where like we built both an iOS and Android app with like very limited resources and any of that stuff. And, so we're excited to see what happens, right? And so big part, and going back to before, like storytelling, like my job now is like, all right, now we got the design focus, or design figured out. We got the branding figured out. We got the app, right, almost being built. We're about to like do the alpha test on it, right? Now you're constantly trying to figure out like what's next. Now it's like, all right, well, just because you build something does not mean people show up, right? So let's go talk to the teachers, right? So for me now, it's tapping into the network of teachers I built with Yuday and try to convert them and saying, hey, like we're launching this brand new app. Like, would you be interested in that sense and building up that community? And big part of it, it's like, and I talk about like storytelling, and it's a very true thing because I'm not great at it, where it's like, right, like, what are we gonna do on our social channels, right? What are we gonna do on TikTok or Instagram? And it's funny because it's like, when you look at all education kind of companies, it's like, here's all our features, right? Like we do A, B, C, D, E. It's like, no one cares about that, right? And all our content's gonna be is about celebrating teachers, and we'll do like fun things that's truly engaging, right? And we're like, let's find someone, that's young, social, like, that could help spread that, right? Spread that word and create some content for us. But yeah, so think about distribution as well too. But and there's a funny thing where, there's a saying, I'm sure most people in this room know about it, but they say first time founder focus on product, second time founder focus on distribution. And it's a very true thing where everyone's like, oh, I'm gonna build the next Instagram, I have all these features, and then the second time founder's like, how can I distribute this? So now I'm thinking like, what are good partnerships? Teach for America, right? Charter schools, public schools, private schools. Like, let's just start plugging away at where we can get into and prove out those metrics to then go raise that next round, right? But also being very careful of not jumping on that VC hamster wheel, because most people, like, raising money means you just have longer to figure out if you have product market fit or not. You could hide behind that, for us, we're like, let's take capital as jet fuel to help us whichever way we can. So.
Yeah, that's great. Can you just talk a little bit briefly about product market fit for students that maybe aren't, haven't learned that concept yet or don't know what it means?
There's a bunch of terms that you're going to learn what product market fit actually is, right? But it really, there's a technical term and there's all these other things, but it's really building something that people love, right? That people are willing to use, right? What's the job to be done, right? Are they actually turning to you, right? And you got to look at it in phases, right? I think like as a first-time founder, I'm like, oh, everyone needs to love my product. It's like, no, you're focused on the innovators in the beginning, right? And there's a percent of these, or 1 or 2% of these people that you got to reach out to, and they're willing to try anything because a problem is so big for them that they're willing to test anything out there, right? And then and so on and so forth, right? And and I was talking with Chris on the way here. I'm like, perfect product market fit is look at Groovy Donuts, right? Every day
Thank you for the donuts.
They make a donut and people love it and they eat it. That is by definition product market fit, right? and I think for a lot of times, and you'll hear a lot about product market fit with raising money and all that. It's like, oh, well, when you raise this round, it's to prove out early, or it's to show early traction of product market fit. Then it's like a lot of times money can hide all those things, and that's the scary thing about it is. But then it also dilutes yourself as a company, right? And so for us, our core thing is: do teachers use our app every day, and do parents watch the stories, right? And to prove that retains over time, right? And I know there's a lot of different definitions of product market fit from technical, and everyone has their own version of it. But for us, that's how we see it, right?
Think.
So yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. What other advice do you have for students and other entrepreneurs that we haven't covered? Any life lessons?
I guess I was like, when I was like thinking about this talk, I was like, thinking about like what are the main bullet items? Because I remember when I was in college, like I didn't listen, so you guys are much further ahead than me. There are 5 main things I would say for life, startup, wherever it is, right? Number 1 is, right, do something that you truly love, right? Because that will solve all the other things, right? Because if it's hard, whatever, you're gonna stick through it, right? But you need to take the first step. That's why when Chris was talking about all the programs, I had to lean into that because, right, like that's the hardest thing because what happens, I don't know about you guys, but like, you come up with the startup idea, everyone falls in love with the startup idea. It's like, oh man, I'm gonna be the next Facebook. And then you go through like the whole trough of startup where you're like, wait, this is the dumbest idea. I don't even know why anyone would use that. And like, right, you start thinking about all the reasons why, right? Like, and like, it was funny because even before Yuday, I was like, I was like thinking about like, oh, how cool it'd be for like high school, like I played high school sports. It's like, it was so cool to know like what our rival school was doing. It's like, well, that's basically Snap, right? And like all these other things, but like, right? But you just gotta lean in and stop thinking about like all the like reasons why it can't work and just start figuring out, right? Oh, like for me, it's like, I don't know a teacher. Well, let's go talk to a teacher. I don't know a technical person. Well, let's just go talk to anyone, right? Same thing with job, right? When I realized I want to do investment banking, like my mom was like, there's a Bank of America branch down the street from us. Like, I don't know why you gotta go to New York. It's like, start reaching out to people. I remember I drove down like in the Detroit area, just like knocking on doors, right? You gotta take that first step, right? Like startups, everything is just tackling it one piece at a time, right? You're gonna figure this out, then you're gonna figure out, like for me, I'm figuring out distribution. Right? How do I get teachers actually excited? And then at some point it's gonna be like, okay, well, let's think about funding again, right? And then and so on and so forth. That's number 1, right? Do something that you love and take the first step. Number 2 is you gotta build a network, right? And Michigan State is amazing, right? Think about all the alums that graduate. Everyone wants to help you out, right? You're a college student. It's the best time to do it, right? And that was the same thing for me where I knew no investment bankers, right? And at the time it was like pre-LinkedIn, it wasn't pre-LinkedIn, but it was before LinkedIn got big. I went on Facebook and I started Facebooking like company names and then like people invite me to like their frat party. I'm like, oh, okay, like that's networking, right? But like you want to expand your network and then you want to also surround yourself with amazing people. Because those are people that are going to push you to move forward, right? If that's family, a loved one, friends, startup founders, right? But also pay attention to the people that aren't present in your life, right? Who's going to be there for you when you have nothing to offer them, right? It's very interesting when you're working on a startup, right? and you no longer like make all this money or go on all these trips, and you're like, all right, well, who's still here, you know? And focus on that, right? Third thing is, I would say is, what did I say the third thing was? Okay, you just got, oh, do I have it? Oh.
I have yours.
Third thing, you gotta do the work,
Yeah.
right? You just have to do the work. I'm sorry, but like, you know, like you really have to put in the work to try to figure, if it's, hey, I'm not technical, well, let's go find a technical person, right? I don't know teachers, I gotta go find a teacher. I don't know design, I gotta go find a designer, right? Like you have to put in that work to try to figure out. You have to like just ignore the startup noise, right? And that was a big thing for me. It's like, I keep hearing about this person being funded, this person being funded, this person being funded, right? And like, just focus on yourself, right? And like Sam and I, like a co-founder and I, are just like, you know what? We control our destiny, right? We can do everything within our ability because, you know, he's my technical co-founder, right? And we can figure everything out where, you know, if it's not this, it's gonna be something else. And we're not reliant on just capital to see the next product through, right? And you gotta be very cautious because sometimes the stories that you hear where people raise $10, $20 million, right? How much should they just give up, right? At the end of the day,
in terms of equity.
In terms of equity, right? Like you hear about a sale for a couple $100 million, but if at the end of the day, right, you only own 1% or 2%, it's like, well, how many years did you just waste it too on top of that? And you know, you constantly dilute yourself, and that's a fine balance too, right? The fourth thing I would say is you really need to help others along the way. Like, I know it sounds obvious, but it really isn't, right? Because I think when you're stuck in this where you're like, I'm trying to figure my own crap out, right? Do I really have time to like help someone out, right? It's crazy what a small world this is. And you know, you can't really connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect it looking back. And you know, like how I met Sam was because I took time to like work with this other founder, and it somehow paid off for me somehow. But I went into it not expecting anything, right? And I think that's very important, right? And number 5, I think you have to celebrate the small wins, right? It's funny because like my co-founder, right? Like he worked at Apple before. He worked on the Apple Pay, like you know, fintech kind of founder or engineer, and so like he's so focused on like the product being released, and like it's all these small things along the way. I'm like, hey, take a moment and celebrate it, because if you don't, like, it's gonna suck, because like right when we release a product, there's gonna be a million reasons why we need to change it, and you need to like celebrate those things. And I think being a second-time founder is a big thing for me. It's like, you know, I did the first, like I said before, I did the first company bootstrapped, and you know, now that you know we have a little bit of capital, we have a good team, we have all these things, I get a second chance at it, I'm truly grateful, right? And I think it's very important to like practice gratitude. I'm not trying to be all like, you know, pushing that on you, but like it's a very real thing. And I heard a line last week with was it K Kwan, or the guy that won the Oscars?
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean,
From
he's in
Everything Everywhere All at Once.
He's in the spotlight now, but you know, his story was he after the Goonies, after Indiana Jones, he worked 40 years to be back in the spotlight. And to see him like back in the spotlight now after 40 years, and there was an interview where they were talking to him, they're like, how do you feel? And he's like, life is sweet, right? But he's like, but guess what? Like, life is also all about the ups and downs, and that's how life should be, right? Right? He goes, if you've never tasted sour or bitter, you won't know what sweet is. So it's very interesting. So when I saw him on that stage getting that award, it hit me, because I know what, like, just like a lot of other people here, right? You know what it feels like when someone worked at something and they've been rejected and their dreams come true. It's sweet, and you're just happy for them, you know? So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Let's end it there and open it up to some questions. Thank you so much, Simon. Let's give him a round of applause first. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
If you have a question, raise your hand. We've got a microphone, a couple microphones going around here. Oh, I don't know. Oh, who else had one? I can't see him. Okay. I'll let you choose. Just go hand the microphone to someone.
You get
Sorry,
two
I
microphones now.
can't see everyone out there, so.
Okay. Hi. So I had a question that now when you have a startup and you have so many investors, mentors, people, everyone has so many ideas and like
Yeah.
opinions. How do you narrow it down? Like how do you know, oh, this person said this, but the other investor said something totally different, and then we think something totally different. We have so many people now that are involved and invested in the company. How do you narrow it down, and how do you like know what is the best for the startup?
I just said this to another student before. Everyone's gonna give you advice because everyone loves hearing themselves talk, right? That's just the reality of things, right? Everyone's gonna throw you advice because they want something smart. It's your job as a founder. I think deep down you know what you're building, of what's right, and it's only your decision to say this is what I'm gonna like really consider. You need to like you have to take account for everyone because investors will always tell you like how do people take feedback, right? Do they just ignore it or do they have a reason for ignoring it, right? Just like how people approach me and they're like, oh, you work in EdTech. Oh, this is all the things in EdTech. I'm like, I'm trying to disrupt EdTech though too, right? So it's like I don't really want to like embrace all the, I don't want to say like bad habits of EdTech, but I'm like, let's try to disrupt that in that space. In my heart, I kind of know what the branding should feel like, what the design should feel like, and I'm taking a bet on that, right? Because people, if I listen to everyone that's within EdTech, would be like, you have to be ultra conservative. But then I'm like, well, if I'm ultra conservative, I'm just gonna be another number in this category. How do I stand out? And so, but it's hard. It really, I'm sure you and I probably talked about it before, but like, it's hard because you have to be very conscious of the way that you take feedback and also be like, hey, I appreciate it, you know, but we're going in this direction for X, Y, and Z reason because it's what we believe as a company, right? Because there are some founders who are like, yeah, I'm not gonna listen to you. And then that's where people kind of get a little annoyed, right? So.
Thank you.
Other questions? There's one way over there on the side, by the donuts.
So I'm sitting on the ground, that's why you can't see me. But
I'm sorry, you're sitting on the ground.
no problem, popular guy. So I know you kind of talked about it a little bit, like stuff with even just outside validation, seeing what other people do, but I know you also talked about how a lot of times you build things up in your head and maybe you're, you know, a very self-critical person on yourself, and I know that probably stems from being ambitious and, you know, holding yourself to a high standard, but do you have any strategies that you use to kind of, you know, combat that voice in your head that maybe is too hard on yourself sometimes? Because I know that can sometimes be a problem for me, and I know it's not maybe the healthiest way to live.
Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question. You and I both, actually. No, it goes back to my last point, right? Where for me, you really need to think of the small things that you've done right? Because in our heads, I think we always focus on all the things we did bad, right? Or did wrong, right? And it was like so funny because like I think about my own journey. It's like you can't change any of those things. Why don't you like focus on the things that you actually can control, right? And I'm guilty of it. It's funny because like my wife's always like, she hears me like talking to our founder. She's like, you're such a hypocrite. Like, why don't you take your own advice? I'm like, it's easier to give advice than to like take your own, right? Like in that sense. But it's like, you know, like I care so much about our mission and the vision I have for it, and I just keep pushing. And like it doesn't answer your question, but like I think of all the small things I did right. And those are the things I think about in the moments where I'm like, this is not going well, right? And for you to kind of evaluate like, okay, do I move forward, do I not, and so forth, right? But that's like my big thing is you need, and it goes back to like surrounding yourself with other people that are kind of in your shoes, right? Because there are so many times when like I'll talk to other founders that are going through an issue that I've dealt with, and I say, hey, it's not as bad as you actually think. Because there is that narrative in your head, because I'm guilty of it. I have that narrative of why people are gonna say no to you, why teachers don't care about this, they don't have time for this, all this other stuff. And then the moment that you get one, like a teacher is like, I love this, I can't wait to use this. You're like, wow, cool, right? Like amazing, right? But you know, and something I do is like, right, like you gotta celebrate the small wins, right? But you don't celebrate too long, right? And you don't constantly just think about like the bad things that happen, right? Like soak about it for like a day if you need to and move forward, right? That way, if you think about your kind of mental health, you're always kind of level in that sense, and you try to be. And in all honesty, right, like I'm up and down all the time, but those are things I do tell myself, right? And kind of like mellow myself out in that sense. So, but when you talk to other people, my biggest thing of what led me to my co-founder breakup too was I was part of this pre-accelerator program called Startup Leadership Program in New York. And it was more about like forming you as a founder, right? So it's all the soft skills, not so much about what is your company, what are the metrics and all the other things. And you talk about the co-founder relationships, how it really is like dating. And you hear it, any podcast, any video that you watch, you're gonna hear it over. It's like, you know, your co-founder is gonna be like a marriage, right? And all these other things. And it was in that class where they talked about like, how do you do diligence on that relationship? But also you start hearing from other founders that went through similar things. And you realize, wow, more founders are like you and I than the ones that you read about, right? I think that's why this talk is important, is to realize that like, you don't need everything figured out on day one, right? Like startup failure and success is a very thin line, right? I always say it's like you're walking into a dark room and you're trying to find that light switch. Some people, I'd rather just go back where I know it's light. Some people are like, I'm just gonna keep going. And maybe your finger's on that light switch and maybe you're gonna turn on, maybe you don't reach it, right? And that's the thing, I don't know, like I'm sure you guys heard of like how Ring was acquired by Amazon, right? The doorbell, right? And if you guys ever listen to that podcast or the founder talk about it, and he talks about how within, I think it was, I'm gonna butcher the story, but within like 12 months, he almost faced bankruptcy because his investors pulled out, right? And he got bought by Amazon for like $1 billion or whatever that price was. He goes, can you imagine within 12 months having that low and that high all happen at the same time? And for a lot of times the founders, right, like we just don't know, right? Like, do we give up or do we keep going, right? And you can't really know what's right or wrong until you look back in time for that, so.
Yeah, true. I think we have time for one or two more questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
What resources do you use or would you recommend to stay up to date with like the market or business? Like, is there any books or podcasts?
Good question.
You gotta be careful, right? Because just like your question, right? Like there's just all this content. We live in a world where there's just constant content, right? You know, I, of course, like everyone here that's like startup focused, I do read the Tech Crunches and all that. I listen to a lot of the YC podcasts, or they do a YouTube series now. There's a thing called blitzscaling, and it's been around for so long, and you know, but you basically kind of learn the basics of like startup mechanics and all that, and you can kind of learn all those things that they teach your YC portfolio companies of like how, go to market, MVP, and all that other stuff, right? So they do a good series there. You know, I listen to so many podcasts. I only I can get back to you on like the names, but like I don't want to hear about like, oh, I sold for $1 billion. It's like I want to hear about like the moment that you're like, I'm giving up, right? Like, I want to lean into that conversation, like because that's where I'm at, right? And so I try to find like any podcasts that really go deeper than like, oh yeah, things are great, we sold it. Yeah, like yeah, it was amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like
I like How I Built This.
How I Built It is wonderful, right? I think
because they do often go through the stories, a lot of founder issues.
That one is good. I mean, business related. I mean, like when I was college here, like I always had to like read the Wall Street Journal, which I always thought was funny because I'm like, once you go in the real world, like not a lot of people actually read the Wall Street Journal every day. But like I'm sure like Morning Brew is a big thing here. It's like finding good content. But yeah, you know what's actually kind of good is my wife will laugh when she sees this, but like TikTok is great for content. The right content, right? If the algo hits you right? Like there's a lot of good startup. There's a lot of good start. Like we were just talking about this earlier today, right? Like you can learn all the things you want about fundraising and what dilution looks like and all that other stuff, but you won't truly know it until you go through the process because you're gonna start caring about what does my equity look like. So you can just drink from a fire hose and like, oh, I want to learn all the North Star KPI metrics and all this other conversion, like what makes sense and all that. It's not until you're in that seat where you're like raising money, you're like going through the term sheet where you're like, okay, like I need to worry about this because if this is not right, I lose a good chunk of my company here, right? And so it changes, but it's okay to be ahead too. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, I think we are almost at 7 o'clock. So will you stay around just for a minute or
I'll be
two if
around.
there's some individual questions? Thank you all so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Simon.